Denise Barrett Animal Rescue Sanctuary, and of course they'll soon all be looking for happy homes. And that's the way the news looks here in the West. We'll have bulletins for you throughout the weekend, but for now, from all of us here, have a very good evening.
HTV weather from the Weather Department.
Good evening. What a grey and dismal Friday it's been. The satellite sequence shows a neat swirl of cloud just off to the southwest. This is the culprit that's been pushing cloud and rain across the country with snow in the north. But to the west, I'm afraid more cloud is thickening rapidly again, and this will bring yet more heavy rain for tomorrow. Further afield, things aren't all that better. Tomorrow, that rain will spread into Western Europe. Heavy and possibly thundery showers are likely around Greece. And if you're looking for some sun, the central Mediterranean is your best bet, where temperatures will rise to around 20 degrees Celsius. Nice and warm and hard to imagine for us with yet more showery rain tonight. It may clear to the east with mist and fog patches developing in places. Temperatures are expected to fall to around 4 or 5 Celsius, that's around 40 Fahrenheit. Cloud will then thicken later in the night with rain in the morning. Although some eastern areas may begin bright and dry, rain will quickly reach all areas with mist and fog over high ground and also along the south coast. There may be some respite in the afternoon. After some heavy bursts of rain, especially in the west, brighter conditions with sunny spells, but also showers will move into the west, reaching all parts later. Temperatures expected to reach a very mild 11 or 12 Celsius, that's 52 to 54 Fahrenheit, and feeling quite breezy. Sunday looks a much better day, drier and brighter with those elusive rare sunny spells across the region, just in time for Swindon Town's important match in the afternoon. Temperatures expected to rise to 9 or 10 Celsius, 49 to 50 Fahrenheit, while there'll be a moderate southwest to westerly wind. And that's how the weather looks. We join those sunny presenters on Late and Live next here on HTV. Have a great weekend. Good night.
The HTV 7-day weather line 0336 41 40 40.
Mr. Chairman, how does the bank justify these rates?
Tell me, how long will this child have to wait for her operation?
They're shooting these people. Why can't you go in?
The chairman says you have his full confidence. Worried?
Does your wife know who you're with?
How'd you get in here? How'd you get in here?
What sort of woman is actually going to wear this?
Minister.
No problem. One question. Just one.
Get it straight. Get the Express.
Kinda quiet tonight, huh, Gino?
You! Madre, in a buffalo d'acqua. Don Franco.
You better ring the Royal.
No need, Don Franco. He's just a scratch.
I'm not talking about the car.
For all kinds of insurance, including cars, you better ring the Royal.
Welcome aboard the 1.6 Escort Mistral. For your comfort and safety, you'll find power steering, a mobile phone and driver's airbag. We'll be cruising at the lower price of £9,995, saving you over £800. We hope you had a pleasant flight and look forward to seeing you at your Wales and West Ford dealer very soon.
Now with more fibre. Stay nimble.
So many smiling, happy faces begs the question, have they all won a fortune on the lottery? Or is it something to do with winning some of these tantalizing prizes? Go on, Les, spit it out.
Ah, treasure!
That's right. Family Fortunes, Saturdays 8:15, HTV.
At 12:05 tonight, Father Dowling investigates. Taking us up to that, the topical talk show that's late and live.
Late and Live, the topical talk show where you do the talking. Your host, Dave Barrett.
Thanks very much. Thank you there, Lively tonight. Good evening. Welcome to Late and Live, and let me welcome my two co-hosts of the show. It's Fenella George and Katrina Buchanan. Here they are. Hi. Good evening. And I must say that you look like you've just escaped from prisoner cell blockade tonight.
Here's the second one. The gentleman down here was the first one this evening.
And I used to have a pair of curtains like that. But
we love you, really.
I'm joking, really. Anyway, what have we got on the show tonight, Trina?
Right, well, we've lots to talk about, and we'll be discussing your outfit later, Dave. Thank you. And the HTV 100 are raring to go. You should have heard them just before you joined us, you sore spots. They can't wait to talk psychic, which is what we'll be doing towards the end of the show. We'll be tuned in to the afterlife around midnight, so just you make sure that when we say, "Is there anybody there?" that you are. And we've got a Late and Live band again this week. From Bristol, Batman Swings. They're not psychic, but they are stars. And in the hot seat tonight, we welcome Colin Caffell. His twin sons, Nicholas and Daniel, his parents-in-law and his ex-wife Sheila were all murdered by his brother-in-law, Jeremy Bamber. 10 years after that terrible night, and having written a book about his experiences, Colin is here to answer your questions about the Bamber murders and what has ensued. Then on the soapbox, Karen Goldberg will air her views on PMT. Now, ladies, do you dare admit that you're not up to scratch for a few days each month? Not after Karen's had a go, you won't. Personally, I've never needed any excuse to lose my temper and eat far too much chocolate. But anyway, Tony Cole will be searching for sentences to sum it all up. He's almost there and will be in good voice in about half an hour. And now, yes, I'm definitely getting a message from the other side. It says that somewhere there is a fab and glammy natural blonde. Very overrated, if you ask me, being naturally blonde. But anyway, she's waiting to speak to us. Yes, come in, Fenella.
Why, thank you, Katrina. Yes, naturel, that's me. Not at all. Anyway, look at these marvellous gaggle of girlies we've got here waiting to take your calls. Because as ever, throughout the evening, we want to hear from you. We've got plenty of lines open, as you can see, so don't panic if you don't get through at first. And the number to call us, as ever, is 0272 722 555. That's 0272 722 555. Gosh, they're going already, amazing. But if you're still at work and you'd rather fax us, our fax number is 0272 722 522. That's 0272 722 522. We'll look forward to hearing from you. Dave.
Well, today saw the second reading of the Civil Rights Disabled Persons Private Members Bill. In plain English, it was an attempt to introduce laws which would give everyone, including those of us who are disabled, civil rights, which end discrimination. The truth is that if you're disabled, you're going to face difficulties of all sorts. For instance, there are those steep pavements which most of us take for granted, but which are impossible to deal with if you happen to be in a wheelchair. Well, isn't it your right to be able to cross the road wherever you wish, to get into the office or to get on the bus? But what if making changes to accommodate the disabled might bankrupt a struggling business? Should the government or local council step in? How do you measure disability? Shouldn't the disabled be satisfied that improvements are being made, however slowly? Well, we'd like to hear from you during this discussion, not just your views on the phone, but we'd also like you to vote. The question is, should there be civil rights for the disabled? To vote yes, ring 0891 400 601. And to vote no, ring 0891 400 602. To help us sort out some of the many other questions as well, we welcome Alan Davis of the Avon Coalition for Disabled People. He thinks that disabled people have been made second-class citizens and is fighting against the discrimination which he says exists. And someone who's mother of a disabled son, Lynette Burrows, is our other guest on the discussion. She has first-hand experience of the difficulties which might be met in the workplace and says that what is needed is goodwill, not a government bill. We welcome them both. Alan, can I start with you? What exactly is it that you're looking for in terms of rights for disabled people?
It's the right not to have shops, to have signs outside where they've got a wheelchair inside a red circle with a line going through it to say that nobody in a wheelchair can go into this shop. It's to stop Harrods banning people who use electric wheelchairs for going into their shop. It's to stop newspapers not being able, not putting their papers into braille and tape into large print. It's to give disabled people the same equal civil rights as everyone else in this country takes for granted. There are 6.5, perhaps 10 million people in this country who are being treated as second-class, second-rate, worthless citizens. Those people should have the rights, do have the rights, must have the rights to get what we want according to what we need and what we say, not what some do-gooding minister thinks we should have or some charity thinks they decide we should need.
OK. Lynette... some agreement from 100 there as well. What's wrong with that? That all sounds perfectly reasonable. Why not equal rights in that way?
Well, I just think, I mean, I'm very glad that the disabled people are making a bit of fuss about the obvious deficiencies in people's imagination and generosity towards them.
No,
but it's no good pretending that a disabled person doesn't have problems. They do have problems. Now, if you legislate, just a sec, Alan, if you legislate to force even small businesses to make provision to that anybody who could have any conceivable disability can come in, okay, so you can force the business to take them. But you can't force people's attitude of kindliness and goodwill. And the reason I think it's quite important is because I do think that the most important thing is actually the goodwill. Because no disabled person wants to be in a situation because the people who are receiving her have been forced to take him.
We've had 40 years of goodwill, we've had 40 years of persuasion, we've had 40 years of awareness. I am still denied to go into certain buildings, and my sister and brother, disabled people, are denied in their millions using the same buses. 85% of disabled children under the age of 16 go to segregated special schools. In South Africa, we called that apartheid. We had concerts in this country trying to get rid of apartheid. We have nothing in this country.
All right, let me stop you both there. So I'd like to go to the 100 for some views on this and some ideas about what you feel about equal rights for disabled people. Lady there first, yeah.
Basically, what I think it is, is ignorance. People are afraid to accept people that are with disabilities into society. They're afraid and they don't know what to do about it.
So you think it's fair? I think that's a very fair point, actually.
Is.
Lady there, yeah.
Why can't they widen the doorways to let people with wheelchairs in so that not only can the wheelchairs get in, but the people with pushchairs?
Yes,
These shops must be losing immense amount of business.
Right.
It's not about what you're going to lose, it's what you haven't already got.
It's what we've got to give.
Or what maybe you
yes,
can
exactly,
gain as
what
well.
you've got to give.
OK, lady here, yeah, what do you think?
I'm the mother of a very severely physically disabled child who has cerebral palsy, and there's a couple of points I'd like to make here. One is that when people are shouting about animal liberation, my son has to travel 300 miles to a school to be educated in a segregated school. And the other thing is that whilst the government are shouting about £17 billion for the changes, can I just say what the future holds for my son? I have to carry him up and down stairs with my husband, and he's 11 years old. In order for me to have changes made to my home, I had to means test. It would cost £40,000 to make changes. It cost given to take some care. He'll be spending in his lifetime because I will no longer be able to care for him, and I have a right to do it. I'm spending £250,000.
OK, I'll ask you about the charity thing, because I know that's something that Alan feels quite strongly about, and I get a comment from him and say...
Every time I need something, and my son's... to put my son in the car, let's just put this into context. If you buy a large car seat will cost you £87. To buy a large car seat for a child and enable special needs costs £327.
Can I ask you, how do you feel about getting help from charities? Do you think that's right? Do you think that's acceptable?
Why do I go with my begging cup and lay out my life and what I earn, what I got to everybody, just to give my son...
OK. You feel very strong about it. You did outside telethon and stuff like that. Yeah. But at the end of the day, somebody has to pay for this. And if charities aren't paying for it, it means everybody else has to.
Why should I, as an ordinary member of society, have to rely on somebody bathing in baked beans, dressing up in the gorilla suit, or abseiling down Mount Everest backwards to get my basic civil rights? We're not talking about luxuries, we're not talking about...
But are you throwing it back in the face of those people doing that?
We're talking about the right to go where we want, to go to a school that's not an apartheid system. We're not throwing anything back in anybody's face. If people want to... Hang on, let me finish.
I'll let Lynette
if people want to give money. There are plenty of organisations of disabled people that we run, we define, we say when, we say why, we say how.
Right.
It's those organisations that are run by us, not by some all well-meaning, but in the end, do-gooding people who don't have a direct experience of the oppression. It's not just about prejudice, it's not just about awareness, it's about institutionalised inherent discrimination.
Right,
Let me stop you
there, Alan, because I want to bring Lynette in. What do you feel about that, and what do you feel about charities?
I just think it's counterproductive to produce language about oppression and that sort of thing. I don't think that is the point. I absolutely agree about the education of handicapped children and all that sort of thing. But you see, this is a bit different from what we're talking about this bill, which forces, for example, somebody that I know that's got an office at the top of a spiral staircase. Now, you know, under the legislation, he would be obliged to have wheelchair access. He hasn't got wheelchair access to it. So that just causes ridiculous problems. I think it's got to be done with common sense and goodwill.
Right, hang on a second, Alan. I want to ask, how many people agree with that? Put your hand up if you agree with that. So there are quite a few, but put your hands up if you disagree with that. It's kind of fairly split, I'd say. Oh, do we have anyone in the 100 here who's an employer who employs people? Yeah, go to Gafir, because I'd like to come to you. I'll come to you in a second, sir. But you first, sir. Yeah, how would you feel if the law made you do things and made you spend up money so that disabled people could get access to your building and stuff like that? Would you be happy about that?
My situation is rather different. I'm part of a management team of an organisation where we employ 86 in total disabled people.
Right.
People with learning difficulties. And I was trying to get in a point to Alan. I may have just mentioned, and I'm sorry to mention the other side, but I did watch him on the other channel last night. And again this evening, and nowhere in this discussion yet have we brought up the problems that mentally disadvantaged people have.
I think Alan's probably covered.
Now, OK, you're saying Alan covers this, but let me point out that the Avon Coalition are very active in Avon and have a great deal of influence with the funding agencies that we need to survive. Now, their attitude to our type of sheltered workshop stroke placement scheme is that we are wrong. We have mentally handicapped people who are very happy in a situation where they're working with their own kind.
So what are they doing? Just tell us what they're doing. Are they making things?
We produce files, folders, we produce hospital folders, we produce army
Hold on, let me just put that back to Alan. What's wrong with that, Alan? Do you think that's wrong?
What we say is that disabled people, given the amount of money and support that goes into sheltered workshops, many disabled people could actually work in mainstream open employment. And this question of choice is an interesting one.
But hang on, Alan, sorry, can I just stop you on that for a minute? We live in a very competitive world, 3 million people nearly unemployed. It isn't a fair world. We've got to be realistic about this, haven't we? And disabled people, as much as we would like a perfect world where everybody gets equal chances, disabled people are not going to get equal chances. Don't we have to be realistic about that, as much as we would not like it?
Did we say that to black people in the 1970s? Did we say that to women in 1905? Yes, we did. And women got the vote. They said that
That's
to black.
A little different,
they said,
though, isn't
no, it isn't. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. No, it isn't.
Someone here is saying it is. I'll come over to you in a second, sir. But yeah, go on.
Can I just ask Alan, does he come from Liverpool?
No.
No. Well, it sounds as if it caused a lot of... I do think it is different. And I do think it is different between rights for disabled people when it requires a greater expense. It's different giving women the vote or giving the black people the rights to go to work and work in normal circumstances.
Equal pay legislation, my friend, costs money. That got through.
Right,
changing the retirement age costs money. That
Alan,
got
I want to
through.
get some more comments on the 100 and I will let you respond. Gentleman there first. Yeah, sir.
Thanks, Dave. I think we're actually talking about disability of society. We are actually missing the ability of these people. When it comes to the workplace, an employer goes through the forms, he's going to get an equally qualified person with a degree who's disabled and one without, one with a degree who's not disabled.
Yep.
What's going to actually happen is that employers can discount the disabled person on the account of the situation he's in, irrespective of his qualifications. And I have several instances of this.
Isn't that logical? I'm not saying it's fair, but isn't it logical an employer is going to pick the best person for the job who is going to be able to do the job to the best way possible?
But surely...
And someone who's disabled may well be at a slight disadvantage.
That really shouldn't come into it. If that person,
so we should have a lot of changes
person who's actually qualified to do the job...
Right.
I mean, you take, for example, Professor Stephen Hawking.
Yeah.
There's a prime example. If the person's qualified to do the job, surely that's the best person the employer should take on.
Gentleman next to you wanted to say something as well, sir.
Yes, I would like to ask him a question. I mean, you talk about disabled people. Somebody said subnormals. What I feel is that people who have the sort of intelligence that a lot of disabled people have, instead of attacking the government, instead of saying you want this and you want that, you should use your own intelligence to help people like subnormals, to help the parents of subnormals to go away for a little while and know that the
Right, hang on, there's some disagreement around here from there. Who was disagreeing with that? Gentleman at the very back. Let me just go to you, sir. Very back row, yeah.
I think disabled people, mentally handicapped people have the same rights as any one of us here.
Okay. Come back over here because I want to talk to our other employer. But first of all, I think we've got some cards. Fennella's got some of those with some views from home. So let's see what people think.
Indeed. Right, Des Cooper from Gwent says his wife is profoundly deaf and she is discriminated against. It's sheer pig ignorance. At the end of the day, we're all human beings. Cal from Bristol, I totally agree with the disabled bill. Disabled people are capable of doing work, but employers are not providing the correct environment. Heather from Bristol, her comment is, I'm proud to be a disabled woman, but I want my civil rights and not to have to plan 2 days in advance to go anywhere. And finally, Dave. Jean Palmer from Downend. Only 2 people had passes. This is quite a good one, actually. I've noticed this myself. Only 2 people had passes for disabled cars out of 15 spaces allocated.
Right, OK, it's an interesting point. I want to go back to our other employer over here. How would you feel about the law making you make changes to your workplace, to your work environment, which probably is going to cost you money, in order to create places for disabled people? Would you feel happy about that?
Yes, I would. I mean, basically, you've got to pick the best people for the job. Now, I mean, you don't look... I mean, I hate the term disabled to start with, because people might have an impairment of some sort, which prevents them doing one certain thing. But the rest of their faculties and abilities are as good as anybody else, if not better. Perhaps these other faculties compensate for the ones they haven't got. So for start off, you're going to get a person, if they feel they can do the job and have the ability to do it, should get all the backing they need. Now, if industry has to take a cost on to do this, then the government should step in and help with that. Because
so you're not prepared to do it?
No, no, I am. I'll share costs.
But let's be, I mean, you know, this is all very nice, it's all very politically correct, but if you have 2 people for a job, OK, and they both have equal talents, but one is perhaps disabled, and you know that if you take that disabled person on, it's going to cost you X thousands of pounds more, you're not going to take that person on,
Yes, but it's unlikely you'll get 2 people of exact equal talents. You'll pick the best person for the job, irrespective. I mean, I'm not saying you should not look at whether or not the person is disabled. You should take the person with the best ability.
OK, let's go back to the sofa, because I know both of you want to sit. Lynette first, and then I'll come to you, Alan.
No, I mean, the point is everybody would like the best of all possible worlds, but you've got to bear in mind the cost. I mean, if a company, if it actually means several £1,000s, would it not be better if instead of forcing people to do things which is not going to create the right environment, the government, if they were given a job, agreed perhaps to fund them? Now this I would go along with. If an employer decides that he wants to take a handicapped person or someone that needs some sort of help, and the government actually has some input, that would seem to me sensible. Not forcing all employers.
All right, hang on, sorry, I want Alan to... Hang on a sec. You haven't got a mic, so we can't hear you. Alan, you wanted to say?
Yeah, I mean, Lynette is regressively and sadly totally missing the point. What we're talking about is that if we had full civil rights in Britain, we're actually talking about what disabled people can give to society. What discrimination means is that millions of disabled people aren't being given the opportunity to contribute to society. And in terms of what the Avon Coalition think, what people with learning difficulties, we have open membership. We welcome people with learning difficulties. We welcome people with all impairments. We support the right of all disabled people to have proper choice. But how proper choice means every level you do, chooses what exams you do, and even chooses what job you get in the future. That is no choice.
Let's go back to the 100.
Well, I work for a newspaper that times a year we have a feature called Special People with Special Needs. Now, in the course of working on that feature, I have to speak to lots of disabled people, and they seem to resent that expression, special people.
Well, it sounds a bit patronising, doesn't it? Do you think it's a bit patronising?
That's terrible. The only reason we've got special needs is because society has forced our special needs in the first place. By building.
You can't blame society for the fact you're disabled, can you? Which is almost what we're saying here.
What I think we can say is that we need to look at why disabled people experience discrimination. I don't experience a lot of my difficulties because I can't see. I experience them because the material isn't available in formats of my choice. I didn't get a social work job in the second city of Britain because that social work manager thought I'd cost too much because I couldn't drive. What she wasn't prepared to do was to say, right, we'll give you the same money we give to our non-disabled social workers to pay their petrol, to pay your taxi bills. Easy, solved.
So they're not being adventurous enough and imaginative enough, sometimes, employers and people like that, when they're offering
And
jobs.
they're also not thinking through how, when they put on their advert, a driving licence is essential, they actually don't need to put it when they can provide the resources to drive. And the government do provide financial support.
Let's get some more comments. Lady there, yeah.
I think people look at the disability before the person. When I was unemployed and I was looking for a job, I'm sure I lost a lot of jobs because I'm very, very deaf. But if I told people I was deaf, I immediately got the reaction, ooh, really absolutely. But if I didn't tell anybody, nobody even knew.
Okay.
Because I managed to get around it.
It's a fair point. Gentleman on the front row, sir.
I think, as well as pushing for improved rights for disabled people, we should also tackle the government on the complete absence of a civil rights bill for the able-bodied community as well. I mean, through acts such as a criminal justice bill, everyone's losing rights. It's only by having a bill of rights for everyone, disabled people included, that we can try and break down some of the barriers which exist at the moment.
Okay, fine. Let's come over to this side. Lady on the front row, yeah.
I've actually been disabled. I had a stroke a few years ago and I find myself suddenly in a wheelchair, which the majority of any of these people here could find themselves in the same situation. You know, what concerns me is that this lady is talking about these people, they're going to be forced to have to put in proper staircases and things like that. I'm sure if she found herself disabled, or any of the government politicians found themselves disabled, excuse me, they'd find the money to make sure that they had their ramps and they had all their facilities.
Because it could happen to any of us tomorrow.
It could happen to any one of us. It happened to me.
Sir, yeah.
I mean, to be honest, you are a person, I would say, who understands the price of everything and the value of nothing.
I've got a handicapped child.
Fine.
I've been through. Don't come all pious with me.
No, I'll tell you what.
I've come. No, you don't.
Getting angry, are we? Getting wound up, are we?
Like. I do sympathise. I know. I'm not talking as an outsider sympathy. I've got a mentally handicapped son.
Hang on.
You're getting it whether you like it or not. You have to be. If you want to be accepted like everybody else, then you have to listen to other people's opinion and not just bang on about what you want. I want something too. And I want my child to be accepted on his own worth, not because someone's been forced to take him, because that way the relationship will last.
Relying on the goodwill of people, right, who for the last 15 and 16 years only moral objective has been greed and avarice, is rather like saying Aslan the deer is not a crook, allegedly.
All right, let's go to the gentleman on the end, sir.
Yeah, we seem to be going on about the physical disabilities an awful lot. My son is autistic. And one of the things that I found right from the very start is that nobody gives you anything.
Absolutely.
You have to go out and you have to fight for everything. When we got that diagnosis, we walked out of the doctor's office into a nice day, birds singing, and we were the loneliest people on this earth because we didn't have anybody to talk to. And all it would take is a little thought on the doctor's part to say, look, the medical things will follow, the physical, you'll be booking him into a clinic to get a full assessment of him. That will happen. But in the meantime, here's a phone number. There's a lady on the end of that phone.
Yeah, but
she's been there, she's seen this. But these things don't happen because there's nothing there to back it up.
Hold on, let me put this back to Alan for a second, though, because it's likely that if there is a woman on the end of that phone, that it's a charity. But you're moaning you don't like charities.
What we're saying is that charities, unfortunately, at the moment, have to fill a gap that the government won't fill. And there's loads of public research to show that if people knew their money through income tax was going directly to the health service, directly to education, they would be prepared to put a penny or so on income tax.
How much more do you think that people will be prepared to put on tax? You know, another penny on tax, another 2 pence on tax? Do you think they'd be prepared to do that if they knew that money was going to help disabled people? Do you feel that?
I think that if people knew in this country what disabled people really had to face and what it actually feels like to have somebody speak on your behalf and all you are is a picture on the screen with soppy music and all the mist surrounding you, then they would, yes.
Let me ask the 100. Hang on, I want a show of hands. If you thought that another 2 pence on your income tax would go to give disabled people equal rights totally, would you be prepared to pay it? Put your hand up if yes. Yeah, pretty unanimous yes there. All right, some more comments from the 100. Lady there, yeah.
I agree that we need government legislation, but I also think that the government should start thinking about children and how children look at disablement in schools. It's
That's
quite
where it
often
starts.
they come. That's right. They come across
with the guide
a person that's in a wheelchair, and suddenly that person is fearful. They just don't know what to do, and until it's explained to them that you've got to look past the person and what's inside, and then we can start doing something about it. Then we can start learning.
Dave, can I just say, I don't want anybody to look past my blindness. My blindness is absolutely part of me.
Excuse me, I've got a thalidomide brother.
Right.
He's 25 years old.
Yeah, I'm just going on what you said.
I've also got a daughter with epilepsy.
Right, I'm just going
Very
on...
bad epilepsy. I've also got a brother that's a psycho-schizophrenic that takes epilepsy. So don't preach to me not to look behind your blindness.
I wasn't. All I was saying was what you said was you want people to look past whatever they see into the person.
They're people too. It's not just a disability.
And that's what
Let me stop you both a second,
because
because we have a result on our vote, and we asked, should there be civil rights for the disabled? 74% of you said yes at home, and 26% said no. So, again, the audience at home is doing an audience here on that one. OK. Take some more points,
Just a question for the lady. I don't mean to be patronising at all, but do you think when your son is 18 and maybe that you might not have so much of a part in his life, that you're going to think the same way you do now?
Well, as a matter of fact, he's 24, and he's had a job now for the last 8 years. What he did was there was a government department that operates in Cambridge. They helped to find him a job. They offered somebody in that job £25 a week to keep an eye on him whilst he settled into the job. After about 6 weeks, he was okay, and they were able to withdraw this befriending money.
How many people have
extremely
opportunities?
useful. Sorry?
How many people have the same opportunities that
Well,
your
in
son
Cambridge,
had?
everybody does. And where
In
you see, I
Cambridge,
think this
it's
falls
great,
down,
isn't
all
it?
the compulsion falls down. If you knew, actually, in various areas, the rights that the disabled have, which are just not used because the government agencies don't do
All right,
it.
let's get a final comment, because we're almost out of time. Lady just there, yeah.
What difference does it make if the money comes via taxes and demanded from society, or whether it's given with love and charity through charity? Surely he's asking for positive discrimination.
Right. OK, they will have to leave it around the time. Let's have a round of applause for our guests on the stage. Thanks for watching.
While we're taking a break, our psychics here in the studio will be calling up their guests, which I think are somewhere around, I'm not sure, so that they can join us at about midnight. And we'll be back in a few minutes with our regular topical songwriter, Tony Cole. But before he strikes a chord, we'll be hearing from soapboxer Karen Goldberg on the subject of PMT. And it's not funny. See you in a minute.
Welcome back to Late&Live. Now, do you ever get an uncontrollable urge to scoff 4 whole packets of chocolate biscuits for no apparent reason? Yes. I do. Lovely. And what about bursting into tears for no apparent reason? Yes. Me too. Could be PMT. Well, I don't know what you're nodding forward to. Young man, could be PMT. But our soapbox guest here, Karen Goldberg, has her own particular views on the subject. Karen, you've got 1 minute to air your thoughts. Best of luck, and that minute's now.
Thank you. Well, I'm sick and tired of all this nonsense about PMT. Women are supposed to become completely irrational and uncontrollable once a month. In fact, it's gone so far that women get let off shoplifting charges, driving offences, even manslaughter on the basis of suffering from PMT. Well, I won't have any problem with that kind of idea, because I think that kind of idea has been used to justify why women should be in the home and why not equal doing the same jobs that men are doing. That's a problem. If you were an employer, for example, would you employ a woman as an airline pilot or a surgeon or even a swimming pool attendant if you thought that once a month she just couldn't function normally? You probably wouldn't. And that's my point. I think we should reject nonsense that once a month we're not responsible for our behaviour because we've got these hormones swirling about in our bodies. I think it's completely insulting to women.
I see some mixed feelings around it.
It's to be in my house today because I nearly killed everybody.
I do you substitute an excuse?
Every month, everybody's like...
Right, I'll see it, yeah.
Menstrual tension. That's my nickname, Pat Major Tantrum. Every month.
Do you think it's just that, like, because you know it's going to happen around then, it's kind of, you kind of created it now? Right. Condition response. Condition response, yeah. Don't roll the Ferrari.
What is it some women suffer every day?
I think that's the bit on that point might have actually. I was expecting from somebody like him actually.
Well, yeah, no, sorry. Okay, yeah, go on.
I work with quite a few women, and unfortunately, no, very nice to see out too. Like, I've got to know the pattern, and they go through very certain moods, different times of the month. And I got into the habit of saying PMTs, and they'll only come to me and say, yeah.
But it has to be said that there are some doctors and researchers who say that PMT is a myth, it does not exist.
It does.
Yeah, hang on a sec. Ah, that's a good point.
Most generation, it was never discussed years ago.
That's it. Yeah, it's a point, isn't it?
Well, I just say mental hose, that's why.
Sheldon at the very back, sir.
I have to agree with the person doing the soapbox, because the reality is that there's no medical or statistical evidence to support that hormones create tensions. But I wouldn't disagree with the fact that one time a month, women really want to let it.
You got lucky.
Women are forced to whole responsibility at home, whole responsibility of the kids. What's the problem with letting rid?
There's lots of studies done recently, actually, that show that women who don't have those hormonal changes for their period, and there's lots of women who don't for various reasons, they still suffer PMT, which would indicate it's got nothing to do with hormones. I think it's got a lot to do with the fact that when women have their period, it means they're not pregnant. And being not pregnant or pregnant is a very big thing in
Go on, lady up there, yeah.
I'm pregnant, I still get it.
Lady in the very back, yeah. What did you want to say? Hold on, please, not all at once.
There's a world of difference.
Hang on a sec, hang on a minute. Can a bit of quiet, please? Thank you. Right, go on.
I think there's a world of difference between getting a bit cross and grumpy once a month and actually going and committing a crime. How can you put that down?
Because women have manslaughter for all sorts of stuff. Is that fair? I mean, can it be used as a tactical excuse? Yes, go on.
There's actually, she's mentioned studies, but there have actually been studies of women who were involved in car accidents and women in prison who have committed violent crimes. And the majority of those women, it was found that the crimes were committed at that point of the menstrual cycle. So you can't say it has nothing to do with it. I find I have loss of concentration, I get aggressive, and I'm actually been treated for it. And with the treatment, I'm fine. You tell my work people who put up with me for a year, and it destroyed my relationships, which have taken 2 years to recover with the treatment, that I don't get PMT.
All right, Karen.
Well, I think that once a month we've got an excuse to completely let rip, binge on a lot of chocolate, become a bit irrational. Fine, but as soon as you use it as an excuse for uncontrollable behaviour, it gets thrown back in our face. Because what people are going to argue is, why should a woman get this particular job if she's completely irrational every now and again? That's what gets thrown back in our face, and I just don't think we should accept that at all.
Absolutely stupid. Turn around and say it's because a woman has suddenly realised that, oh, she's pregnant. My wife suffers from PMT. We've got 3 children. When we go out and she sees a baby in the pram, she walks straight by. It's me that looks in the pram and think, oh, I wouldn't mind. And another thing, I do believe that women should be treated with great if they ever do and cry. I've been married 21 years, and there's been times when I've had breadboards thrown at me, potatoes thrown at me, and if there'd been knives there, there'd be thrown at me. And that's only because of PMT.
But can your wife not get some treatment to stop it?
Yes, she has had treatment.
So why are all these women going on every month having it and arguing with their husbands when they could get some treatment?
It took so long to get the treatment because when you go to a doctor, a lot of the time they sort of brush you off with, oh well, that'll go away. It's all down to the woman's
Karen, do you think the women are their own worst enemies here in a sense then?
Well, in a way, yeah, because I think that physical symptoms around PMT, so what? You know, I get headaches every now and again. A lot of people feel under the weather every now and again. But does that explain why they go and shoplift? Or does that explain why they...
What, lady here says yes. Lady here, yeah, go on.
Say something to you. It's not a hormone that creates PMT. It's a chemical that's released into the bloodstream. And yet I do get tablets for it, and I haven't taken mine tonight, and I'm feeling very, very violent. I've got to tell you.
Right. Well, you said got this. Let's go to sir. Yeah.
This shoplifting is a rubbish and crime, but the anger that actually comes up, you know, is real. And maybe make it compulsory to wear armbands or something when.
All right. Well, we'll leave the final word to Karen because I think we're almost out of time on this. Karen, what's your final word on this?
I just think that the frustrations of everyday life is much more likely to drive women up the wall than hormones are. Like being stuck at home with a toddler all day long is much more likely to drive you to moments of madness than a few hormones running around your body is.
Well, Karen, thanks so much. Give her a round of applause. Well done. No, stay. Stay there.
Now, it's not so much that time of the month as that time of the show because it's time for Tony, and I didn't know that he was such a new man. Because, Tony, you're going to sing to us tonight about women's things, aren't you?
Girly things.
That's lovely. Oh, yeah. What time of the month is it for you? Is he safe? All right. You just take care of yourself and hormonally serenade us, Tony.
Oh, my God. I feel more like an old man than a new man, really. As I walked one day by the river, I swear this wasn't a stunt. I spied a fine young couple come drifting by in a punt. Then the young man smoothed his blazer as he plunged his pole in the broth, when this sweet demure young maiden unleashed her mighty wrath. You're a piece of scum, you are lower than a bum, you have killed my passion, you've given me a rash. When we touch, I get the feeling of some slimy thing congealing. Oh, I really think the time for us to part has come. Well, the young man's brow it furrowed. He put his long pole down, and over his fine young features there passed a becoming frown. He said, darling, we can share this. I'm not some heartless dunce. You're a little stressed out at the moment, but it's only the time of the month. And she said, you're an A1 nerd. You are really quite absurd. You'd be second or third to a putrefying turd. And my lost infatuation's quite unlinked to menstruation. Get it through your stupid head, I'm giving you the bird. Well, the young man smiled and nodded, as he would to a child of 3. He put his left arm round her shoulder and placed his right hand on her knee. Then something snapped inside her, and she grabbed the punt pole like a totem. Then she pitchforked him into the river with a sharp burning pain in the scrotum. And she said, you're a great big poo, and you make me want to spew. You have all the allure of a suppurating sewer. I wouldn't even frown if you should stay right there and drown. And it's purely unrelated that my period's due.
Late&Live. Now, whatever you may think of ghosts, whether or not you believe in spirits, you'll want to join in our debate about spiritualism later in the programme. And if I say Fat Man Swings to you, that's not a psychic code. It's the name of our brilliant Bristol band who'll see us out after midnight. But first, let Dave introduce this week's Hot Seat guest.
Thanks, Fenella. Well, 10 years ago this August, an Essex farmhouse and the Bamber family became headline news. The horrific scene which police discovered in the early hours of that August night was the result of 5 murders. The victims were Neville and June Bamber, their adopted daughter Sheila and her twin sons. You may remember seeing news footage of one of the funerals when Jeremy Bamber, Sheila's brother, was seen to be in a state of extreme anguish. Jeremy Bamber is now in jail serving 5 life sentences for those murders. At the outset, it seemed plausible that his sister Sheila, with a history of psychiatric disturbance, had murdered their parents and her own 2 children, and then turned the gun on herself. Our guest tonight was married to Sheila and was the father of those 2 little boys who were shot as they slept in their bed. Here's Colin Caffell. Welcome to you, Colin. Not many people go through that sort of experience in their lifetime. How did you deal with it then, and how do you deal with it now?
I think the most important thing for me at that time was really a decision right from the beginning not to be beaten by it. In a way, my 2 kids lived their life like at 150 miles an hour. They lived every minute as though it mattered and as if it counted. And I thought, I've heard people say that to start to show any sign of improvement would be a betrayal to their lost children. To me, the betrayal would be to be engulfed in the bitterness. So I think I've set out to celebrate a life and try and live my life as they would have liked me to, which has been hard at times, because when you have that sort of experience, at first you feel like you're going completely crazy. It's like you're being thrown into an abyss, into hell, and it's like you become very numb and you don't feel anything, you're in a fog. And then 6 months later or so, when you think it's going to start getting better, it starts hurting more as the shock wears off. Then the depressions come and the suicidal feelings and the murderous feelings. And
now, in the early days, in the very early days, you were a suspect yourself, but obviously that soon proved not to be the case because of that. I think it was Bamber who almost gave you the alibi to prove that there was no way you could have done it. Well, but your ex-wife almost was also implicated at first as possibly of having murdered the family. How did you feel about that?
Well, what happened right at the beginning was that it was set up to look like she'd gone crazy and killed everybody and then committed suicide. And the gun was found on her chest. And I sort of accepted that because Jeremy sort of set out to set me up for it right from the start and get my story corroborating his by telling me about conversations that happened in the house the night before, an argument where his parents had threatened to take custody of the children and put them with a foster family and things like that. So with that idea in my mind, I thought, well, if they said something like that to her, knowing how much she loved them, then I could believe her doing something like that to prevent that happening.
Right.
So I was sort of set up on top, you know, with the fact that she was treated for mental illness.
Sure.
But
now Jeremy Bamber is still to this day claiming his innocence. Do you have any doubts in your mind about his guilt, and do you fear his possible release at any later date?
I've absolutely no doubts about his guilt. I do fear his release because he's a very seductive person, and there are people who listen to him, and that's scary. And I think maybe they're a bit soft in the head to actually imagine that this man could be innocent when there's so much evidence against him.
Because there's almost a campaign now on his behalf, isn't there?
Well, he's got an organisation sort of fighting for him, but then there's just as many people who are fighting against it. For example, some of the journalists who do campaign for genuine miscarriages of justice have seen the report that they've sent him, and they said it's rubbish and they throw it in the bin.
Let's go to the hunt for maybe some questions or some points here. Everybody got some things they like to... So, gentlemen here first, sir.
I just wondered if you fear for your own life if you ever got released.
Yes, very much. I'm one of the people who have fought to keep him inside, and I think my life would definitely be in danger, as would his cousins.
OK. Some more questions. Gentleman on the front here, yeah.
Can I ask you how you've managed to rebuild your life since what's happened? I mean, somebody just wouldn't think of something like that happening to them, you know, losing your children. I mean...
Well, I think
not just your children, but kind of all...
I don't think you can imagine anything like that ever surviving something like that, but when it actually happens, it's remarkable how resilient you are. But I think the things that helped me were, as I was saying, that attitude, but also I started writing. And the writing was initially to try and put the record straight on Sheila's behalf, because the press vilified her so badly.
Somebody done that to my children, I mean...
Well, I felt murderous. I wanted to kill for a while. I wanted to kill Jeremy. I felt murderous towards his parents because I thought they'd actually set up the whole thing.
Sure. Let me ask you, I mean, has anyone in the audience had an experience like that where someone in their family's been murdered or killed in that way? Yeah, gentleman over here, sir. How did...
well, I can identify with Colin. 4.5 years ago, my mother had a phone call to say that her grandson had been shot, and the lady that made the call said that he didn't know whether his father had been shot or no. It transpired that my brother had been shot dead with both barrels of a 12-bore shotgun. Some 20 minutes later, when ambulance-men were round his body, my nephew went looking through a woodland and he was shot. I saw the people that committed this crime walk away from a Crown Court without a jury decision. I feel very bitter. I've been campaigning for justice on this case. We're with Justice for Victims, a group probably of which you'd know of. And earlier, well, last September, we went to the probation officers conference up in Salford, and 20 of us represented 15 murder victims. The chief probation officer for Greater Manchester was horrified at what he heard. So was a woman psychologist from Rampton.
You can really identify.
I can, yeah. I could sit with Colin and other people, and I mean, you can talk, but to explain this to anyone else is.
I'll come back to Colin because I know Colin is very much involved in counselling now, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But let's just go to the gentleman behind first. Just a couple more points.
Yes, you use the word Dave there. These days, we hear of people going through traumatic experiences being counselled left, right, and centre.
Yeah.
Did you have any such counselling at all? Did you have any?
Not initially, no. I sort of provided my own counselling. I started writing. And I found that a tremendously healing thing.
But a lesser man would have needed counselling. A lesser man in terms of determination.
I think it's important to have some support, somebody who's there to listen to you. A lot of counsellors are not equipped to deal with that sort of trauma, and that's one of the problems. But on top of that, I think we all have a capacity to heal ourselves to some extent. And I was lucky that I had my own self-help support group because I had a very good community of friends around. A lot of people don't have that. And I'm involved with a group called SAM, which is made up of...
Right, I was going to say, you've got into supporting and doing counselling yourself now, and you don't just counsel victims, you also counsel murderers as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't actually say it was counselling. I do therapeutic work, and I've been involved in workshops in prisons.
Having gone through what you went through, some people might find that a very unusual step to take. Yes, I'm sure they could understand you counselling or helping other victims, but why did you decide you wanted to help some of the people who perpetrated these crimes? Well,
for me, I think it was I needed to be able to look into the eyes of a murderer and try and understand what was going on. To try and I found I needed to understand, and that was my whole motivation all the way through. But I also felt that the sort of anger that people keep inside them is so destructive, and when somebody goes in prison with that sort of anger that can cause them to make them commit a violent crime, unless it's dealt with in the prison, they're going to come out even angrier than when they went in. So my decision to be involved in that sort of work is to try and be involved in some sort of thing that's going to help to change the sort of person who's going to come out, the rehabilitation attitude.
Let's get some more points. That's excellent. Gentleman on the end there.
When a person commits a horrendous crime like Jeremy Bamber did, don't you feel they should pay the ultimate penalty for that crime?
No, I'm totally against it. And the reason for that is speaking to a number of police officers who have been at serious crimes trials, they often talk about the sigh of relief that runs through a jury when the verdict has been given, and then they hear a string of past convictions, so that it lets them off the hook. With murder, there's very rarely a past conviction, and to make a decision that's going to end somebody's life and not know whether you're whether you are totally right. With somebody like Jeremy, who doesn't fit the stereotype of the murderer, he's very charming, very good-looking, well-educated, everything to live for. It's hard to believe sometimes to look at him that he is a murderer.
But
and he might have got off.
If that person led out into society, do you think he'd have the capability of murdering again, though? You know, he would murder again?
I think so.
OK, let's go to gentleman on the end there, sir. Yeah.
I obviously bow to your superior knowledge. I wouldn't want to go through anything like you've gone through, but I also have to say, I'm sorry, if that happened to me, I would not rest until that man died, and I would do it. If somebody slaughtered my children...
I can understand you feeling like that.
I admire you for not feeling that way, but in what part of the process do you stop feeling murderous?
Difficult. You can't actually sort of put a date on it.
No, but
I think I had to work through my own anger and rage, because I came from a family very similar to the Bambers that never showed its feelings. And we always, it's one of those families that always put its lid on them. Every time you sort of felt angry, you never showed it.
Is that good?
No, it's not good, because every time you do that, that anger gets stored up and stored up and stored up. And in our society today, with so much, such a pressurised society, there's a lot of people walking around like unexploded volcanoes.
How did you
Prisons
release
are
your
full
anger?
of them.
How did you release your anger?
Working with a very well-known Swiss psychiatrist called Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who works specifically with a process that lets out the feeling in a very safe, appropriate way. And I'll train with that's the work that I do. That's what I do with prison workshops.
I admire you, and I'm only saying at the end of the day,
No.
Thank you. Over there, yeah.
Do you understand the motive behind your brother-in-law's murder, and can you come to terms with that?
Well, on paper, as far as the courts are concerned, the motive was a family fortune. It's far complex, and I couldn't actually put my finger in a few sentences. That's what I've spent most of the book that I've written trying to understand, what it is that makes somebody turn a gun on their entire family. It's complex. I think there's a whole compilation of events that happened right through his life, because both Sheila and Jeremy were adopted children, but my mother-in-law was treated for manic depression. Sheila was treated for psychosis and schizophrenia. Jeremy blew all their brains out. There's no genetic link, no blood link in that family. So something happened in that family to make that happen.
To finish on a more positive note here, what about the future for you? What do you feel the future holds? Do you look forward to it with hopefully much better things coming up?
Yeah, I do. I think I'm probably a stronger, clearer person than I ever was before. But it's not easy moving into the future when you've got that sort of... And the greatest challenge now is to move on with identification with it, from my own identification with it, and also from people who know me identifying me with it. I'm sort of go to a dinner party and this is Colin, this is what happened to his family, and watching people pale in front of me. I'd rather that not be my sort of calling card.
Do you think doing the book is going to kind of bring that chapter to an end almost, so you can then
because
move on with your life.
in a way, my private life, my family's private life was violated so badly when it all happened that I had to sort of throw it completely open and say, OK, you want my private life, it's right here.
Right.
The whole family's... But now my private life starts again.
Sure. We really appreciate you coming on the show. We wish you the best of the future. Thank you very much.
Will be played out tonight by our band, the very Fabaroony Fat Man Swings. But before that, spiritualism. We'll be talking about psychics and mediums after the break, so we'll see you in a few minutes.
Welcome back. Well, is there life after death? And if we are able to make contact with something out there, then doesn't that give us proof beyond doubt? Well, certainly the Spiritualist Church believes in a life beyond, and its members are convinced that they have contact with the dead. To tell us more, we have Glyn Edwards, who teaches at a college run by the Spiritualist National Union. He's an expert in all hands-on psychic skills, and from him, students learn how to prove that contact has been made. He has a critic sitting at the other end of the sofa. She's Wendy Grossman, who founded a magazine called The Skeptic. She totally rejects the idea of making contact with the dead. Welcome to you both. Glyn, if I can start with you. I know that some of the things you teach include things like, you know, making tables move and that sort of stuff. I've seen David Copperfield do that. What does that prove?
Nothing except that you can use energy to move a physical object. That's all, really.
Right. So what other things do you teach when you teach people how to...
My main area of teaching psychic skills is to deal with clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, trance work, such things as that. And how to demonstrate publicly and how to put over contacts to the public in the right way.
Can you actually teach people, or do they have to have that skill to start with?
Well, no, you can't really teach. What you can only do is help them to hone up on what is already a natural ability.
Right.
That's all you can do.
OK. Lots of people do believe in this. Why do you feel so sceptical?
I'm not happy with the quality of the proof, basically. The other thing I think is, you know, if as many people say, if everybody has talent of varying amounts. I mean, you know, Mozart was playing chords at 3. Why don't we have, you know, people that are incontrovertible showing up every so often, you know? Then there wouldn't be people like me hanging around.
Right. Maybe Glyn might argue that there have been, but that's another point. Let's go to the... Has anyone here had any psychic experiences or been to any mediums and found it an interesting thing? Yep, gentleman there, sir.
My wife and I went to view a house once, and we went upstairs, but it was dark, night time. We turned the light on, had a look round. Yes, that's okay. Went down there, turned the light off. We got to the bottom of the stairs, looked up, the light was back on. We went in the other room, closed the door. As we went back out, looked back, the door was open again. And so we got out there, we got out there very quickly. I was going to tell you, we didn't bother.
How many people think that this is just not credible and that really it's nonsense and that these sort of things don't really exist? Yeah, gentleman on the end, sir.
Anybody can make something happen. You have great magicians, as you say, David Copperfield, who can make tables, wobble, etc. If somebody does enough research on the person who's come to see them, it's quite possible to give them all the information that they want. If I go and see a psychic, I want to know about my grandmother, for instance. And if they know that I've got an appointment with them next Friday, they do their research on me, they'll find out enough about me.
How do they do that if they've never met you and they don't know you?
Well, they'll ask for a contact address. There are ways around it. Private detectives have access to
why would they bother spending vast amounts of money on private detectives when they're probably only charging you 15 quid?
Well, I'm saying private
detectives make an awful lot of sense, that, does it?
Well, no, they have access to various information on people.
Right. OK, well, let me put that back to you then, because don't some mediums and clairvoyants milk for information?
Not the ones I know, no.
Right.
No, and this particular point this gentleman made here, I mean, that would be virtually impossible to do because, simply because one hasn't the time. For instance, in my own case, I've been away from my own home for 3.5 months travelling about, living out of a suitcase. And when people make appointments, they're making appointments with churches, etc. I don't even know the names of the people that come for sittings.
What's the difference between just mediums and clairvoyants and the spiritualist movement? Because it is a church, it's a movement. What's the basic principle and the basic belief of the spiritualist church?
The basic belief of the spiritualist movement, especially the Spiritualist National Union, there are a number of organisations in spiritualism. There's the Christian Spiritualist organisation. There's the SAGB, the Spiritualist Association of Great Britain. Then you've got the College of Psychic Studies in London. You've got another College of Parapsychology in Edinburgh, for instance. I belong to the SNU, the Spiritualist National Union, which is a rational organisation that really just looks at, with a very open mind, at all aspects of what these things are. We believe in the fatherhood of God, the brotherhood of man, personal responsibility.
Do you believe that spirits or entities are all around us? I mean, are they in this room now with us?
The spirit entities. They're around us, yes, they interpenetrate this dimension, but as to whether they're here now is another matter. They have a life to live just like we do.
Do you sense anyone here amongst
No,
the
I
audience?
don't. No.
No.
I don't.
Okay.
I'd like to say something going back to this information thing. I recently heard of a scam. I mean, it was an out-and-out scam, apparently, in the States, where somebody rented a room, was running a psychic hotline, and was using all of the computer online databases to look up information about people very quickly. He could, from a name and very minimal amount of information, could get all sorts of stuff on people. And I mean, as I said to you earlier, I write about computers quite a lot, and all of that stuff is becoming much, much easier. I'm sure you wouldn't indulge in anything like that.
Let's go. We've got to get to Billy. You're clairvoyant. Yeah. You do readings of people. You go around. Do you do stuff from platforms as well to people?
Yeah,
or?
we do theatres. And
you do theatres, so you do kind of that big stuff.
Yeah.
Is there any way that you can research people?
Well, I don't see why we'd bother. You know, I mean, obviously there are charlatans in this movement, but I'm sure Glenn will verify that most mediums are reputable. And certainly those belonging to the SNU, you know, they wouldn't have the time to do that. I actually run a centre for psychic studies in Liverpool, where we're involved in pretty much the same work as Glenn, training people who have psychic abilities, and it just wouldn't be worth it.
What do you feel about the spiritualist church movement? Because there are a lot of clairvoyants and mediums who don't have an awful lot of time for it.
We need an official body, and the SNU is the biggest organisation in the world.
Right.
But not all mediums belong to that. I'm a Class B member. I'm not an SNU medium, but I do belong to the SNU movement.
Right.
And I do SNU.
So there's quite a bit of hierarchy there, just like any church, almost.
It's in, yeah, I think so, yeah.
All right, fine. Okay, lady behind you, yeah.
I'd like to ask the lady there to give me an explanation. My mother died when I was a month old, 13 years of age. 2 years later, I was fast asleep in bed. I woke up, my mum was standing beside me. She told me my father was going to be taken ill. Now, bearing in mind it's just me and my dad in the house, my father was going to be taken ill, but I wasn't to worry. She hadn't come for him. He was going to be all right. Went to school the next day, told my friends about it, and they all said, oh, it was a dream. You wanted to see your mum, you've missed her, etc. Fair comment. That night, my father walked out the bathroom and collapsed on the floor. I ran down the street, got my brother-in-law, rushed Dad to hospital, etc., etc. He was very ill, but he didn't die. Now, as far as I'm concerned, my mum came back to give me comfort. I hadn't even heard of spiritualism. I was 13 years of age at the time she died. I was 15.
All right.
I'd never been to a spiritualist church.
That was kind of proof to you, yeah?
Yeah, I've been to a spiritualist church since, and I must admit that I believe.
All right. Can you explain that?
If you find it persuasive, that's certainly within your rights. I would say that coincidences do happen. But they do.
But my father wasn't ill. I wasn't worried about him.
I just want to move this to
happen.
All right, let me just move this to another area. Is there anyone here who maybe is a churchgoer themselves, not a spiritualist churchgoer, who feels that this is dangerous, or that it's evil, or there's something, you know, people shouldn't dabble with this sort of stuff? Yeah.
Yes. I go to Society of Friends, Quakers, and we meet every Sunday and we pray as the Spirit moves us. I think there is a God and a heaven and reincarnation, possibly, but I think that there is also a devil force in the world, a dark force, and we may be drawing on those darker forces.
So you think it could be dangerous then, really?
But I think that spiritual energy is vital, and I partly agree with the speaker.
Gentleman on the front row,
Yes, 3 years ago my mother was tragically taken from us, and a friend of mine who is watching the programme tonight is a spiritualist in Bristol. And he has told me that my mother has come to him because we were all very concerned that we wanted to try and contact her. And she now, through speaking with him, he tells us that she's keeping herself very busy, and he has regular contact with her. And it's like the lady at the back said, it's a comfort because there is life after death. And it's a comfort to us all that when we lose our loved ones, that they are there. And my mother comes to visit me, and I'm not ashamed to say that she does, and she visits my other brothers and sisters.
So you get comfort from that, yeah?
Yes.
All right.
But what he did say, Dave, was that because the spirit rises from the grave, my spiritualist friend tells us to keep flowers in the house for my mother because she comes to the house rather than leave flowers at the grave.
Can I make a comment on that?
Very, very quickly, because we've got to take
because I can understand what you're saying, but some of those things I would just be a little bit cagey about. I am, even though I'm a working medium, sceptical about some of the claims that mediums make where communication is concerned, and I'll come into that.
Sure. We'll perhaps get to that in a second. Let's find out what you're thinking at home first, though. Fenella has got some cards and some comments. Fenella, what you got?
Super, thank you, Dave. Well, Angie from Somerset has been a widow for 2 years. She has been to a spiritualist and it helps her to go on with life. So thank you for calling, Angie. Jacqueline Murray from Somerset, an opposite view that the psychic phenomenon is evil and people are preyed upon. And 2 questions. Mr. Webb from Cardiff. Can Glyn move anything in the studio, is one question. And the final question is Susan from Salisbury. How do you find a reputable psychic?
Right, that's a very good question. We'll get asked that in a second. Can I just bring in, I want to bring in some other guests we've got up here. Phil and Sheila Scott, who are mediums from near Swindon. What do you feel about the whole idea about the spiritualist church and the way people go to churches and the way they go and see mediums?
Well, first of all, can I say that the lady said that she doesn't believe in raising the dead. Well, as far as we're concerned, you do not die anyway, so right, you're not speaking to the dead. And can I also say that spiritualism is fine, but really it's the spirituality that we've got to look at. And I think if we look at Colin, he is a prize example, especially reading the Kubler-Ross books. It's now going to a different area of actually working within yourself and being aware. And that man, to me, is very spiritual.
Okay, great, okay. Phil, you're a medium, you give readings for people. What actually is going on when you're doing that, when you're talking to people? Are you hearing voices from people who have passed over or dead, or what? What's going on?
Sometimes I hear voices clearly, as I can hear your voice. Sometimes I get it through a thought pattern. Readings are only a very, very small part of what the spirituality of life should be about. I get quite concerned at times when I hear mediums say, well, you know, I've got your mum and they know you. I know they're trying to comfort people, and I get a bit concerned that they might be just comforting in the wrong direction, saying it's okay, you know, they're okay, they're fine and all the rest of it. But there's more to life and there's more to what we've got coming in front of us, and I know that the SNU actually would say that I was a bad medium, if you like, because I give guidance for the future to go through problems that are in life now. The SNU say you should only give evidence of the past. Now, to me, that is a little bit pointless, in as much as we've got lots of problems in our lives now and we need to look to the future, although there is a place for it. I think spiritualism is very good for a base, right, and then we move forward.
Okay, do you disagree? Do you give people advice about the future?
If it comes, at times, yes, but not always. But can I just make the comment there?
Yeah.
You see, there is a law in this land that does not permit you to forecast the future. To do so is a criminal offence.
What do astrologers do then?
Well,
they're breaking the law.
Not all astrologers forecast future events, but that is not something you are supposed to do. The SNU stands for Proving Survival After Death, but that can only be proven as far as you feel it is evidence to you. It's not something that's evidence to everybody else. It's something that is personal to that individual, and we must remember that. And yes, of course, there are people that come seeking advice, guidance for future things. But you see, you can't always guarantee that it's going to happen. You can't say that in a year's time such and such is going to happen. I have met a number of people who have had things forecast at exact dates and times, and it has not come to pass.
All right. I want to bring Colin back in, actually, who was with us earlier, as you know. Because did you go to a medium after all this happened? What was your experience?
I went to see Betty Shine, who's very well known.
Well, she's not really a medium and doesn't claim to be one.
I don't know what but basically I went along very sceptical. I didn't get any background history at all, and got some remarkable things told to me, but not so much. In my visit, I got my own personal messages, as you say. But there was a friend of mine who went to her shortly after, who she knew absolutely nothing about. I know I didn't tell her anything about him. And during his session, where he'd already had some survival evidence about his mother and various musicians he'd worked with, she said, "Are you anything to do with Colin? I can see your children. These two boys here who remind me of his children." And she said, "One of them's sitting on your shoulders, trying to touch this silver balloon up in the air that keeps bobbing up and down, and he can't quite reach it. And the other little boy is laying on the floor, screaming, laughing hysterically." And he remembered an event that when he was at the Royal Albert Hall, and they had this mirror ball hanging on 30 yards of chain from the top of the auditorium, and Daniel was on his shoulders, trying to touch and the roadie kept on pulling the chain. And he said, and Nicholas never let me put him on my shoulders.
So this was kind of proof for you then, really, in a sense.
Yeah, well, I think that's pretty remarkable. Right. It's specific events which she couldn't possibly have known about. This was something that happened where there was no audience around. This was just
okay. I'm going to get a few more quick questions because we're running out of time, but just very quickly before we go back to the 100, is this sort of stuff dangerous? Do you think? Can it be dangerous for people?
Well, I think even Glyn here would say that it can be, in the sense that you're putting your trust in the statements of one other person at a time when you yourself are particularly vulnerable. I was interested in what you were saying about personal proof, because in most areas of science, we are able to reach a consensus. Like, you don't have a thing where washing machine technology might work one day and might not work another, and if it works for you, that's great, but it doesn't work for me. There's a lot of stuff in the world that has been built up through science that we actually can't agree on, and the fact that the proof is so debatable, and and on such a personal level, from a scientific viewpoint, I find that debatable.
Well, right, no, I'm going to have to leave it there because unfortunately we are completely out of time on this, but let's thank all our guests. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that about wraps it up for tonight's show. And don't forget to tune in next week. But before we go, Fenella.
Katrina, we do actually end this evening with some live music. Hurrah.
Fenella and Katrina, right, thank you very much indeed. That is it. We will see you next week at the same time. We finished with Fat Man Swings and a great song. We'll see you next week at the same time. 1 to 100, 1 to our guests. Thanks for joining us. Good night.
Bye.
Ain't got a home, nowhere to roam. I'm a lonely boy, I ain't got a home. Well, I've got a voice, well, I love to sing. I sing like a girl, when I sing like a frog. Well, I'm a lonely boy, I ain't got a home. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. Whoa, 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 whoa. Whoa, 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 whoa. Whoa, 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 whoa. Whoa, 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 whoa. I ain't got a man. I ain't got a son. I ain't got a daughter. We ain't got no one. I'm a lonely girl, and I ain't got a home. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Ooh, ooh. Got a mother, I ain't got a daughter, I ain't got a sister, nope, not even a brother. I'm a lonely frog, and I ain't got a home. I love to sing, won't you sing to me? All I'm trying to say is just sing to me. Come on now, just sing to me. Well, I'm a lonely old frog, and I ain't got a home. Whoa, 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 whoa. Whoa, 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 whoa. 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 Whoa, 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 whoa. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Whoa, 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 whoa. Whoa, 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 wow, 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 wow. Rivet.